why don't you tell us what it is that you guys are building?
So what we're building is a platform for real-time information about street parking. So the idea is that everybody needs that information from people who actually need it in real time, like people driving right now and looking for a spot in the street to park their car, and people that are evaluating how uh, their house, how is it from the perspective of parking situation. People look for what's there to walk around the property, what is there to eat around the property, what's the education situation around the property is, and also what's the parking situation is. So we provide that parking solution. And also there are professionals who drive and park multiple times a day, like drivers of Comcast, AT&T vans, Deutsche Telekom vans. They look for parking 5 to 10 times a day. For them, we can provide real-time, real advantage for their lives. They can save up to an hour a day by knowing where a spot is.
Yeah, and we've seen startups like Lux Valet really take off here in the city, and this could definitely be something that would be useful for them, not having to use parking lots for all of their inventory. Great. So, this has been a idea that's just been around for a long time, right? Like, this is a very clear pain point for anyone who's ever driven a car and tried to find parking. But the challenge has always been actually getting the inventory, like knowing where the parking spots are, is it free, so on and so forth, with what frequency. So how do you guys actually collect that data?
Right, right. That's a great point. So I'm a data scientist. I went to Stanford for my PhD in AI and became a professor at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, doing the combination of AI and machine learning. And I thought, doing that data science should work because people have tried to solve this problem for more than like 10 years, 15 years in
Hmm.
all kinds of methods, myself included. What we decided to do was to take data that is noisy from many sources, including our own users, but not just the users. Also data from navigation companies, telecom companies, and data that we curate ourselves with proprietary methods that we developed, put those together and just connect the dots very, very carefully between all of those data points. And when you do that really carefully, you can tell with very good probability, here there is a spot in this street, and here right now there is no spot in the street.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you tell us about some of those specific feeds so people have an idea of like what you're pulling from?
Yeah, so navigation companies and telecom companies have some way of knowing where moving dots are. The moving dots are of many sources. They could be trucks, they can be cars, they can be people. Um, Many times you don't know what the dot is doing. You don't know if it's on a bus or riding a bike. And some of these dots are parking, but they're not parking what you think they're parking. Some of them park illegally. Some of them park in an underground garage. Some of them just got out of the car. So you get all of those dots from all of those sources, and you figure out correctly enough, if they parked and if that spot was legal.
Ama- Amazing. So, tell us obviously, the degree of accuracy with which you can predict a parking spot being available is going to depend upon the quality of data, the number of feeds you can get access to in a certain, geographic area. In your location with the most data, how
Mhm.
accurate are you?
Right. In the location with most data, we do very well, close to 85, 95%.
Wow.
In the worst places, it's like 70%. On average, we do 80%. So we show you green, so that means there is parking in this street right now, and that's 80% correct. And we show you red, that means there is no parking in that street right now, and 85, 85% we are correct, and we cover the entire city. And that's really the claim to fame because we are able to do this not at a small scale, but at a large scale, really
Incredible.
covering every street in the city 24/7.
Wow. Yeah. So this is great. Let's back up. How did you guys get started? You mentioned, obviously you're a data scientist and you have some other folks on the team, but there were a million problems that you could have really focused on. What's the story that, really brought you to parking as what you wanted to spend the next 10 years of your life on?
Right. A friend of mine was saying, why don't you solve cancer? It's kind of like, why parking? And I mean, the truth is, really, I mean, first, I really love parking. I really love parking. I love it so much that I do it every day. Uh, but besides that, this is a problem that touches everybody. And I thought this is, if we're able to solve this, we're able to solve many other
Yeah.
problems that are very, very similar with very similar kinds of data. Now, there is an economy of data, and everybody's aware of it, and a lot of people are talking about it, but what do we do with it?
Hmm.
Parking, I think, is the place where we can right now provide value, and while solving it, we are able to develop the technology that would solve a lot of other problems.
Yeah, and I want to get to like what those other problems can be in a moment. But let's kind of like figure out and run through the entire parking industry first. So there's a bunch of different stakeholders that you kind of have to bring to the table to make this work. And some of them you're going to be buying data from. Some of them you're going to be selling your data from, just selling your data to. Help us understand kind of the entire ecosystem of Parknav.
Right. So, in the uh, demand side, the closest to the table, those who want to buy right now, are automotives. So, the automotive OEMs and also the navigation system OEMs. So, they take our data and embed it in their system. Real estate companies, they show to their customers where there's food around the apartment, where there's education around the apartment, what's the crime situation around the apartment. They also want to show parking, how long it will take you to find parking in the evening.
Hmm.
Um, so they are also there and ready to buy. And the third segment is the service fleets. So those that I mentioned, like AT&T, Comcast, Deutsche Telekom, they have large fleets that look for parking multiple times a day. So that's on the demand side. On the supply side, there is the data companies that are very, very, very careful on selling their data. So these are navigation companies and telecom. They're very careful because the data is sensitive and there has to be uh, due diligence on how uh, we provide the data in such a way that no privacy is breached. So all of that is done very carefully on all of the party sides because everybody has a lot to lose, but also they see that there's a lot to gain. So the industry and market are developing, and there are a bunch of startups that are trying to capitalize on that and try to create a marketplace. But the sellers are very, very, very careful. And so there is a lot of business development that has to occur with the sellers before they're ready to sell to you.
Yeah, so tell us about that. Obviously, being able to acquire the demand side is going to be dependent upon having enough data sources to be able to accurately predict if a parking spot is free. So,
That's right.
how has that process gone for you guys? How much of the data have you been able to get with what kind of geographic coverage? Just walk us through how you think about the supply side of your business.
Right. So we were lucky in that we got an investment from a child company of Deutsche Telekom. And so they allowed us, they connected us in a trusted way to some data suppliers. And those data suppliers, that really got us to the right people at the right time. And so we were able to close those deals in very, very favorable terms. We are continuing to acquire more and more, but we already have enough that we're able to serve all of the US and all of Germany
Wow.
to our customers.
And when you say the U.S. and Germany, you mean with that, 80 to 85% certainty in the best case when there is
That's
something
right.
free. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So, you spoke about on the demand side, kind of obviously, in a sense, the holy grail is just getting as an OEM into all these different, automotive companies and the real estate companies, so on and so forth. How have you thought about kind of launching and focusing on a consumer-facing app that might possibly give you more data as well that you can feed back into your system versus kind of this longer term really being the hub for parking location for the entire, economy?
Right. So we do have an app for both the Android and the iPhone. The app is still with a UX that is clunky. There
Mm-hmm.
is no question about it. But we already have 100,000 people using it.
Mm-hmm.
This is just for the two cities that we had until like uh, a month ago. On the we had only Chicago and San Francisco in the U.S. available to consumers.
Mm-hmm.
We released the other like we released like 18 other cities just a month ago for consumers, but so far we haven't pushed that B2C angle
Mm-hmm.
because we have already customers that are looking to buy. So we paid most of our attention there on closing those deals.
Okay, great. And so obviously the deals that you close on the kind of BD side are going to be huge in terms of revenue and then possibly access to more data as well. Um, the consumer app you chose to only launch in two cities. What was the logic behind that as a starting point?
All right, so at at many places we were unsure of what will be the impact of releasing that app on our sales.
Mm-hmm.
So we heard from our customers some hesitation on, well, if you give this app for free, you know, namely the car customers, uh, they why would they pay extra
Mm-hmm.
for this if it's available for free in the app?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the industry has since matured, so um, we were able to argue well that that won't happen.
Yeah.
Um, People would pay for the convenience of having it integrated into the other things in the car, and the car OEMs have been convinced by this.
Great. So you'll kind of continue the rollout, obviously, with these 18 new cities, and just make this much more available, right? Because obviously, and I want to talk about competition in a moment, but um, being able to really stay ahead of everyone else in terms of having more data to better and more accurately predict where parking spots are is going to be important. And if you have, the kind of Waze-like interface, which it seems like you mentioned at a certain point, where someone can actually say, oh yes, there's parking on the street. I don't know how you guys are actually gonna tackle that. As you go through iterations, will be valuable for you. So do you see that as like an important part of your maintaining this lead in terms of identifying parking?
Right. So absolutely, there is the data that we're acquiring through the app, and that's part of our barrier to entry. There are great many companies that want to compete. Some of them have the data. What's lucky for us is that data scientists are nowadays rare,
Mm-hmm.
and good data scientists are even rarer and therefore expensive. And most companies, especially startups, cannot afford them. And those that are, like say, the Googles of the world, they have a bunch of very very good data scientists who can actually apply to things on the ground. But the bunch is very small,
Mm-hmm.
and so a turning their eye specifically on our segment is kind of a narrow segment for them to spend, somebody who's worth $500,000 to $1 million a year
Yeah.
on this thing. And it's not that they cannot do it, but they, so far from what you have seen, they have tried and failed. So we talked to multiple companies in the navigation space, in the data space, mapping spaces. Several of them have tried in using different methods that we've already developed, and they just failed. So they spent like a year or two of like 2 or 3 PhDs time, and they didn't succeed. And so now they're turning to us because the market is ready.
Yeah. So how do you think about competition? Are the folks that you worry about, Google or Apple or someone like that, really going after this full bore, or is it other startups that are in the space, or even marketing companies? If there
Right.
are like one group of competitors that you would think about, who are those?
Right. So I mean, all of our competitors are also potential customers.
Yeah.
The trick is to sell very carefully, for lack of better terms. We are, especially navigation companies, they're positioned, and with respect to data, they have the right data to compete with us, but they don't have the right people. Again, it's not like they cannot hire the right people, but usually it takes more than just hiring the right person. you have to know what you're doing.
Right.
And it's just research and development, so it's like 2 years of development of something. So we are selling to them, but very, very carefully. The IP is not spilled
Yeah.
for any reason. So I kind of switch hats sometimes. I'm on some conversations I intentionally don't join because if I join, then I would just be the chief data scientist
Yeah.
and not the CEO, and it doesn't make any sense to bring that kind of a person to the conversation. So
Makes sense. Yeah, so it sounds like, obviously there's kind of two components that really drive the success of your business. One is having access to all this data, and then two is having the right team, enough of folks that are uh, great at working with this data to be able to mine the open spots. So we talked about the data. Tell us about your team and kind of why you guys are the guys to do this.
Right. So I was lucky again. I mean, I got a team of amazing individuals. Besides myself, so I was a Stanford PhD with 20 years of experience in data science. I was a University of Illinois professor for 10 years. I left a couple of years ago, but I'm still an adjunct professor there in computer science. Um, my co-founder Sergey, he's the guy that runs everything on the development side and is able to run our development team and develop everything really in a matter of nothing, days. Gerhard is a biz dev guy from with many years of experience in Siemens selling, but also doing his own startups. And so he knows how to sell as a startup, and he's really able to close every deal. And Jeremy, he's an MBA from University of Illinois, and young guy, 20 something, 28, who's able to really catch all the balls. He does the product and marketing for us.
Great. So on the kind of data science side, it's really you and Sergey figuring out the algorithms, tweaking everything to make sure that it's as highly functional as possible.
Right.
Do you feel like you're going to need kind of more data scientists? I guess, it's useful to understand at what point you get to diminishing returns, right? If you had,
Right.
30 more of you, like how much better would you get? Or is it kind of
Right.
like maybe one or two more?
So first, I was lucky to have been a professor at the U of I because I hired two of my former students.
Yeah.
So it's hard to hire those guys, and so we were lucky in that sense. And so they also took my classes, so they're the backup data scientists. Now we do need another senior data scientist on board, at least one, if not two. And again, the lucky position that we have is that we both, myself and Sergey, we both attract technical talent, both on the data science and the programming side,
Mhm.
because people just we have done impressive things besides Parknav, but also within Parknav, and so relatively speaking, I'm not saying it's easy, but relatively speaking, it's easier for us to attract talent. So I'm optimistic about that. I have several people who said, the minute that we can pay us below market, but at some reasonable level, then we would love to join.
Great. Yeah, so talk to us on the biz dev side. Obviously, you guys have focused on this kind of OEM channel as the main path to monetization. How's that going? Kind of how long is the sales cycle for one of these things, and what could it possibly mean for you guys in terms of revenue?
Right. So we have traction in both the OEMs and real estate world and a bunch of others. Unfortunately I cannot mention any names
Hmm.
yet, but the the OEM, we were lucky. We had a proof of concept with a very big and well-known OEM just 3 years ago, and it took them a while and it took us a while to mature to we being able to sell and them being able to buy, but I think we passed that waiting period. So now not only them but the entire industry is waking up and ready to buy, so all of the RFPs and RFQs are starting to come out. The cycle is still long in the sense, compared to other industries. So from the moment you have an RFQ, it's about 5 months until you close a deal.
Hmm.
And so, but the RFQs are coming up. They're like in these months, so October of this year, November. So that's when a bunch of RFQs are coming out. And we are therefore expecting to close these directly in around February.
Great.
So, yeah,
So you've been at this, for a few years now. You mentioned you guys had to get ready on the sell side. They had to get ready on the buy side. Tell us a little bit more about what had to evolve to get you to the point now where it's kind of go time to start closing these deals.
right. So initially we published this. We started with this in Chicago, and we did an app. We thought that it would be a B2C play, and then we realized several things would not work, and we pivoted to the automotive OEM space. That's when we had a POC that paid us a large chunk of money, and we thought that all of the money is going to fly from the sky and everything is going to be happy.
Yeah.
But that didn't work as fast as we wanted. I mean, we were part of this Volkswagen accelerator in the Valley, but we thought that, yes, now it's going to go forward, but we learned from that is that it won't fly forward that fast. And we did a bunch of direct sales to fleets. That's when we realized that small fleets are the wrong thing to go. We need to go for the large fleets. And then we realized that between the OEMs, the large fleets, all of the big customers really they want the country. They cannot really buy a single city.
Hmm.
So from their perspective, the minimal viable product is the entire country, which means at least top 10 cities.
Hmm.
So we just said, well, that's our strength, so let's just do it. And once we did it, the door was just wide open to all of those sales.
So if I understand correctly, you started just localizing your data acquisition strategy. So it's like we're going to
Right.
start in the city. We're going to experiment with a lot of these smaller fleets and consumers and see if we can get adoption and monetization. And I kind of realized that the best play, obviously, was to work with these large manufacturers who needed the entire uh, country in terms
Right.
of coverage, and it just took
Right.
some time for you to be able to get access to the feeds that would give you that type of spread.
That's right.
Cool. And for our investors that don't know, what is a POC?
I'm sorry. POC is proof of concept.
Okay.
That usually, it depends on who the buyer is. Many times it's a free proof of concept. In the case of the OEM, it was 150K proof of concept.
Hmm. Great. Great. And so it sounds like you guys had to figure out exactly who the right customer was going to be on your side. Now, what has had to happen on their side for them to get ready to pay you for your service?
Right. So they had to figure out how to make money on it on the one side. They also had to try it themselves and fail. They also
Hmm.
had to send it to their tier one suppliers and have them fail. So they did all of that. And they tried to dance around it for a while, and so it's not that it's impossible for anybody to do. Look, nothing is impossible. Everybody can do something.
Hmm.
But we're in the right place at the right time, so we're lucky in that sense.
Great. So talk to us about once these deals start to close, what they'll mean in terms of revenue and kind of what the pipeline looks like for getting to monetization here.
Right. So the deals, when they start closing, which if all goes well, I'm optimistic, but the deals are order of 500,000 and up.
Hmm.
So on the downside, you're looking at usually kind of 400, 300K. On the upside, it's million to 4 or 5 million
Hmm.
per deal, value of the deal. Usually these deals full years, so 3 to 5 years, and usually they cover an area. So that would be Germany, that would be automotive, for
Hmm.
example. Um, there are a bunch of buyers, both on the automotive space, also in the internet company space, and also in the real estate space. So all of these are ready. Fleets are not ready yet, but the product and the sales force has to be tailored to them, and I think that we can start that pipeline in about half a year from now.
Great.
As far as workforce. Now, to your question about pipelines, so the way we're going right now, we're selling to the tier one suppliers. That brings us into the car OEMs. The car OEMs themselves already told us that if we had $10 million in the bank, they would just buy from us directly. They need to see that we would stay there and won't disappear.
Yeah.
The tier one suppliers are ready to buy, but they and the car OEMs essentially told them, please guys, please buy from this company. So we already had one shotgun marriage. Now we're in another shotgun marriage with another tier one supplier, and it's so these sales are happening. I believe that there are other things that are developing on the side that would make us big enough for the OEMs to buy directly. And so what would happen is that the next RFPs that are coming out in October, November, those we will already be bidding on them directly. And so we will have our first win in February. So that would be one or two OEMs.
Yeah.
The next year, I expect about 5 to 7 OEMs to have their other RFPs. And these years are, again, they have some lead time, there is some integration cost, and there are the price per car per year.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And so these shotgun marriages are already producing revenue for you guys. Talk to us about, what revenue has looked like this year so far.
Right. So the pipeline, the shotgun marriages have produced LOIs for us and a little bit of revenue. So that means order of 100K. This is not something to write home about. It's not real revenue. This is just the NRE part of the shotgun marriage.
The NRE?
I'm sorry, the non-recurring engineering.
Got it.
Part of the shotgun marriage. The real money comes in when cars start to get sold.
Yep, makes sense. Great. So yeah, talk to us about the market just for parking, and how big you think that it can be for the data you're going to be able to aggregate and analyze.
Right. So every year there are about 66 to 70 million cars sold globally. Increasingly, those cars have connectivity in them. So nowadays there are order of 33 million sold globally with connected drive or connected car, connected something that have some capability of GPS in them. So those are, so I said 33 million new per year. Order of half of them are in major metropolitan areas. So you're looking at an order of like 15 million, 16 million cars per year that are in play. For them, a sale would be at the order of like $8 to $9 per car per year. So once you start a contract like this, then in the first year you have 15 million cars, and in the second year you have 30 million cars minus some attrition, and the next year it's 45 million cars, etc., etc., etc. Of course, the numbers grow a little bit, but you see the compounding effect of this.
Yeah, and so of those 15 million that have some kind of connectivity, the mapping software that's on there is generally free at this point, right? There was a time when folks paid for GPS mapping in their cars, and this would be kind of a premium service that people would pay for on top of it, or is this something that the manufacturers are going to just eat the cost themselves as an added service or perk for the vehicle?
Right. So for the premium cars, usually the price is bundled into the price of the car.
Yeah.
So really, the car manufacturer charges you an extra $2,000 for your car, and then they provide you the service for the next 10 years. For the non-premium cars, you get sometimes bundling of cheaper software there, and many times it also pushes the cost on the consumer. So the consumer would either pay for this by buying packages annually,
Yeah.
or by bundling it with another service, whether it's XM or whether it's allowing some advertisement or whether it's allowing the car to track you and do all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
So,
And,
right.
and so, talk to us a little bit about right now, your first tier suppliers, you're having to go through them versus selling directly to the OEM. Are you guys going to own the interface for the mapping software completely, or is it going to be something where you're going to have to integrate with, another vendor who has to put your kind of parking map as a data layer on top of their existing interface?
Right. So right now, the OEMs buy those services separately. So they would buy the mapping service from one company, and they buy the parking data from another company, and they buy the points of interest from another company.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah. So I mean, these are large enough chunks that of course, they would like somebody else to integrate them, but many times they prefer to buy them separately, just
Yeah.
because the different companies. I mean, these are really, each one of them is a big chunk and a lot of strategy behind it.
Hmm.
Um, of course, they would eventually, somebody integrates them, but the OEM actually chooses the checkboxes,
Yeah.
themselves.
Okay, so there's basically that question goes to there's already a process set up for adding new data layers to the mapping software that we see in cars already, and you guys
That's
will
right.
be able to just slot in there without too much integration challenges.
Right.
Amazing, great. So, how do you think about how this is going to evolve over time? Like, how is this going to change the way that people drive? Right, like there was a time when GPS was nice, and a few cars had it, and some people had it on their phones. But now it's kind of like a must-have, a have-to-have. Right, like you would just never leave the house and get into a car without some type of GPS connectivity. How do you think about parking as fitting into that system?
Right. There are several things that are happening around us, right? The autonomous cars that hopefully would be there in like 3 to 5 years or maybe 10. There is the cars being more connected with more information and displays on the dashboard that kind of like show you things while you drive and perhaps kind of capture your speech. Parking is, from our perspective, is obviously it's part of the driving experience, but it's actually this fabulous point where people, uh, on the one hand, this is a very stressful experience. You don't want to have it, but at the same time, it's that point in the driving where you switch from being in the car to being outside the car. It's being driving, doing, kind of reaching your destination, and then doing the stuff for which you drove.
Yeah,
So it's exactly that point where people make the choice: where would I go to eat? Where will I shop?
yeah,
In Tel Aviv, where I'm originally from, it's like you you first, they say that you first find parking, then you decide where to go eat. So it's
so
it's the same here.
yeah, that's right. That makes a ton of sense. So, ultimately, this would be a feed, into Yelp, right? Or any of these other places where I'm making decisions, which is to say, yeah, sure, this might be a great restaurant, but, your likelihood of finding parking at this hour anywhere in the near vicinity is going to be 10%.
Right.
And so it'll
Right.
become kind of a core part of the way that we make decisions about, anywhere that we choose to drive, which is not something that we have to do, for work or something like that. That's fascinating.
Right.
That makes a ton of sense. Great. So, like, we spoke about kind of like the core customers that you guys will have in terms of real estate, automotive. I mean, there's a plethora of other folks, Yelp being one example. You can imagine ultimately this replacing parking meters, right? If you know when someone has actually parked and the city doesn't have to employ a bunch of these folks, walking up down the street taking coins out. Like, what are some of the other kind of ancillary markets that you think open up once you guys have, enough coverage with this?
Right. So, there are things that interface at the short term with us. So things like, people forgot about Groupon, but, Groupon now, where you can, right when you exit the car, right when you already made the choice, now we can tell you what deals there are around you.
Yeah.
There's that. There is, of course, the integration with payment
Hmm.
where, well, if you see that there is no spot in this area within like half a mile, here are also the discounted parking garages around that we can
Yeah.
give to you.
Yeah.
So a lot of opportunity there. Now those are all in the short term. The We already have some partnerships with some of those garage reservations companies,
Yeah.
for example. Um, in the slightly longer term, you see the same kind of data and same kind of technology starting to tell you more real time about the street, about the
Mhm.
people, about the area. Um, Things as simple as what's the line at Starbucks
Yeah.
here at this corner, or how long, how would I be able to find this shirt in the gap around the corner that I'm looking for? Essentially, think about like, Amazon local the way it should be.
Hmm.
You would be able to know where around you within steps is X, where, you search for X. Oh, yeah, it's around here in this shop,
So
for example.
basically, what you're talking about now is parking is really just, the entry point into, getting some early revenue, really locking in your hooks on these data feeds that you're going to be able to start mining for additional intelligence, which will just tell us so much more about how people are moving, what they're doing, and what's available in our environments.
Fantastic. You really are getting it. Awesome.
I love it. Yeah. And so I'd love to connect you. We have a great company, SmartGing, in our portfolio that's doing a lot of the management for the parking garages, and so they'll have all that data around excess inventory that I'm sure would be a great feed for you guys to access.
Fantastic. Would love to connect with them. Fantastic.
Excellent. Great. So tell us about the largest. I mean, obviously, there's these business challenges, there's technical challenges. You've had both of those throughout the life of the company, and then there's definitely going to be more of those coming up. But what have been the biggest things that you've had to solve, the hardest problems you've had to solve? And then what do you see as kind of the problems ahead of you that you're still going to need to figure out for this to be a huge, huge company?
I mean, we had a bunch of problems that probably many startups have. So, for example, just making sure that the people, that are at the top of the company are able to learn and evolve
Hmm.
and fit into their roles. If you want to be a CEO of a $1 billion company, then better start learning now.
Hmm.
Then we also had our definitely share of pivoting and learning about the industry. Also learning that advice is just that, it's an advice. You know. Now, kind of more on besides my personal learning experiences, the issues that we were able to solve. Um, I think we learned how to, as a team, learn how to be able to sell to
Hmm.
those larger corporations, how to understand the different evolutions of the relationships between the large companies, how they leverage one thing versus another. A lot of play happens there. A lot. It's just incredible. I mean, it's typical for somebody who's doing biz dev all of his life. Probably, it's something that you're used to.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the as far as difficulties besides that, I think we had two uncertainties, two big uncertainties. One is the technological uncertainty, whether something could work to solve this problem, and what would that be? And meaning, how do you find a spot in the street? It should have been there, but nobody was able to solve it. And secondly, what is the market uncertainty? So, who would buy this?
Hmm.
So these are two big uncertainties. If I would start a company, I would not start the same thing again because it's just these are very big uncertainties. But fortunately for us, I mean, we were able to survive through these and are able to essentially solve both of them. So now we're in this fortunate position where we have solved both of them, and so we do have the lead and also the understanding of how the market is evolving.
Hmm.
Um, so there are difficulties ahead in the sense that nobody knows where the industry is going as far as would cell phones be connected to the car or would the car be the next cell phone?
Hmm.
which of those will dominate? Would Google and Apple be able to conquer the console,
Hmm.
or would the car companies be able to um, kind of maintain their position as the owners of the user experience? Nobody knows. I mean, you can bet one way or the other,
But what's
but
nice for you is that either way, you still have the data that you can kind of work with either one of those winners in those scenarios,
right,
right? And it's interesting, I think, that for people that would say, why won't Google just do this, or why won't Apple just do this? I mean, Waze was able to sell for a ton of money, which at the beginning, they had all these same questions, which is like, Google or Apple are just going to do this, and this is not going to be big. Um, but there's plenty of
right,
space to create a huge company in this navigation world.
awesome,
Excellent.
yeah,
So, you mentioned obviously on the sales side, life would be much easier if you had $10 million in the bank. And I'm sure there's going to be a time where you're going to need to raise kind of a big round to really start expanding. If you've had any of those conversations, how do you think about kind of the milestones you're going to need to hit, or the proof points you're going to need to demonstrate in order to hit the next kind of inflection point in the business?
right. So what we're working on right now are the proofs that we can sell the big deals.
Yeah.
Once those close, raising money will be much easier. Fortunately, or I can only cross my fingers, right? But I mean, we are facing a number of those deals right now, so we are in a good position where, at least statistically speaking, I don't know if any of them will close, right? But I mean, statistically speaking, at least one of them should close, and if we're lucky, then three or all four will close. And also the companies on the other side of the table, the time pressure is on them.
Yeah.
So we're in this slightly lucky position. What would happen after that is, once we're able to close these, there are a bunch of already promises on the table. Promises are just promises. And when money is in the bank, that's when you know that the money is in the bank. But if any of those deals closes, then we will be in a very good position, and we will be able to have that $10 million in the bank essentially next year.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, what have we not asked? What have we not covered that's important to know about your business or the vision that you see for the future?
I think that I'm. I think that we have a bunch of if we have a bunch of places where there is an extra opportunity.
Yeah.
If you or any of the viewers knows of the right people for us,
Hmm.
I would love to talk to them,
Yeah.
because we do see the need, and very, very carefully we add here an advisor or there an advisor, and this would be phenomenal. So of course we would love to have the right people on board. So any connection would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And our community's been done a great job of helping out portfolio companies in the past. So, I guess the last thing that I really want to kind of drive home on is that there is seemingly this network effect in a sense, where the more of these integrations that you do, the more people that are using the app, the more data that you collect, the better you're able to predict where parking will be. The harder it is for someone else to catch up. So I'm just trying to understand. I think it would be helpful for our community to understand like how that evolves, right? Like how much better are you going to get with each one of these integrations, which is going to provide you access to hopefully millions of vehicles, or with each 100,000 app downloads and users that you're able to get. What does that look like?
So we will have this network effect for sure. It does require some marketing. We have already experienced with the right kind of marketing in Chicago, and we also know how to, who are the marketing partners or the marketing channels for us, if you will.
Hmm.
The Primarily, by the way, I mean, this is the secret. I mean, the real estate world is really our best partner in this case, for all kinds of reasons. But we've seen that already happening in multiple ways in Chicago, and so this is scalable.
And how are they good partners? What makes a good partner?
Well, they have their own reach, and they pay us per listing per month.
Mm-hmm.
So we integrate together with, okay, for every listing for sale, there is, as I was saying, there's like the education, the stuff to walk around there, and the crime, and then there's also the parking. And then the people who come and check those properties, they also get exposed to Parknav and are able to then naturally use, try, and buy, get the app. Essentially, it's a free app, but it really helps us reach all of those people
Oh, that's good.
who then
So
use the
they're paying you to give you users.
essentially,
Incredible.
essentially,
Excellent.
essentially.
Well, we spoke. Glad that you brought up the real estate. We spoke briefly about kind of the market size on the automotive side. What do you see the market size kind of on the real estate side, or other folks that are going to want to buy this data from you for their own purposes?
Right. So on the automotive side, we see a $2 billion opportunity. On the real estate side, we see $1 billion opportunity, and that's just not just the real estate websites. This is every website that has a location where, has a map and a location that shows you how to get to this lawyer downtown,
Yeah.
or how to get to this office. And together with that listing or that map, you also see how to park around this property.
Mm-hmm.
So that altogether, at the current prices, I mean, the prices that I didn't even mention it. It's like between 3 cents and 10 cents per listing per year. Sorry, per month. I'm sorry. So 10 cents per listing per month.
Mm-hmm.
So at that price, it's $1 billion opportunity.
Excellent. And there's just so many different applications outside of just the parking piece. That are going to be monetizable if you're able to, get through this next stage and acquire all these different customers that are going to help you grow and get more data. I mean, it's kind of you will have. Tell us, the kinds of data about movement that you will have that will be better than anyone else will have.
Right. So I'll tell you, I mean, nobody right now is able to tell in mass and precisely when somebody parked and why they parked there and what they were looking for when they parked there.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way that we built the user experience of the app, we're able to know that somebody is looking for a spot of this kind. They're looking for a free spot. They're looking for a spot that has a permit required, or they're looking for a metered spot.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to know that, and we're able to know what they couldn't find, where they couldn't find it, and where they could find it.